Thanks to our Patreon members for helping to make this episode possible, and we're now available on all the major podcasting platforms. You can find more information at the links below. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Fireside Story where I discuss a brief parable from philosophical literary history and what it means and why it might be interesting to us today. Today's parable comes from Kierkegaard, from his first major published work. I think he had published a few short essays, but this was a 2-volume work called Either Or, and it's the parable of the clown. And it goes like this. A fire broke out backstage in a theater, and the clown came out to warn the public, but they thought it was a joke and applauded. He repeated it. They laughed even more. I think that's just how the world will come to an end. The general applause from people who believe it's a joke. So, wow. So you can read this as being dark, but there's several ways to read this. And one of the things that's important to note anytime you encounter Kierkegaard's work is, as in this case, not always, but in many of his works, he's writing from different perspectives. So hence the title Either Or. Kierkegaard here is exploring different modes of living, different ways of life. And so he has two different authorial voices writing from two different possible approaches to life. And so it's not necessarily Kierkegaard's opinion that you're getting in any given passage, because it's sort of the expression of the authorial intent, and that author is sort of a fictional creation itself. So with Kierkegaard, you're always in this kind of nested, ambivalent position. He was sort of the master of that. But in any case, the first reading of this is very clear, right? You have this theater, you have clowns playing in it, you have different people, and you see a fire. And so, oh my gosh, you run out in the street. And so the people see a clown in the street yelling about a fire. And they just laugh. They think this is hilarious. And of course, the more the clown gesticulates and tries to get, animated and try to explain, like, oh my gosh, like something, the fire is coming. And instead the fire spreads and burns down the town and all the villagers die. And as Kierkegaard says here, this is how I think the world will come to an end, to general applause and laughter from people who believe it's a joke. Right? Like they think the warnings are a joke. And there are various interpretations of this. And one of them, and perhaps the most obvious, I'm not saying these are wrong, is that, wise people are laughed at. In fact, there's a famous parable of, maybe I should do that one of these days, where it says, wisdom is funny and people laugh at it. If they don't laugh at it when they hear it, it's not wisdom. Right? Like this is your response to wisdom, is it just seems so crazy that it's funny. And so people laughing at this is the fact that we tend to mistake, or we often mistake, what is serious and what is important for what is funny and what is hilarious. But even that distinction, which you'll see in a lot of interpretations that discuss this, is problematic because it suggests that the serious is not funny, right? Or that wisdom is not hilarious. So this is one of the struggles that you get here, is that the clown, why would we take the clown seriously? Is the clown the mistaken philosopher, or the mistaken prophet, or the mistaken great thinker who everyone laughs at because what they say seems so foolish and crazy? Or is the clown's message itself hilarious because of our inability to understand wisdom when we encounter it, other than to laugh? Or is it simply an understandable mistake that when we're presented with all of the surface panoply of a clown wildly gesticulating, what else should we say? Is this not in part the clown's fault, right? The clown comes out and has done a bad job of communicating to us because they lose track of the fact that they're a clown. And then you get this very dark conclusion here, which is, I think this is just how the world will end, to the general applause of people who think it was a joke. And of course, precisely what Kierkegaard felt about, the eschatological end of the world is very much open to debate, because again, he wrote from all these different positions, and so exactly what his feelings about religion were, and exactly how we should interpret what he says on anything, definitely open to question, but he certainly seemed to try hard to believe. That much you have to give him, old Kierkegaard. I think he was really struggling mightily to have faith. Whether he actually achieved any, I'm personally pretty dubious. I've said before that anybody who writes several books on faith has no faith, right? Because if you had faith, you just wouldn't have that much to say. You'd say, oh, I've got faith, but don't worry about it. But he was certainly struggling with that aspect of it. But it does raise this question, right, of how should one respond to these messages? And is it always that we end up getting the message wrong, that we just can't hear the message of the prophet? Or, as in this case seems to indicate, is it simply that these sorts of miscommunications between wisdom and the masses may be, understandable? Because when the voice yelling at us is so clown-like and clownish, it's not clear how we should respond necessarily. So this parable, I think, raises a lot of questions. And this is what Kierkegaard does, by the way, for those of you who've never encountered Kierkegaard, is he raises a lot of questions. It's not clear he ever answers them. And so I encountered this a couple of days ago, and it was in another work that was sort of commenting on it. And I thought, I think you've missed the author of the work, which I won't mention, that they were missing the fact that Kierkegaard is rarely doing one thing, right? That there's levels and levels to this. And while he might have been pessimistic at times, and other theologians have actually taken this and expanded it to talk about, this is sort of a Jesus figure. He gets mocked and he gets killed, but he was trying to save the world, but no one would listen to them, right? Like this is an easy interpretation of this. But there is also the notion that, but also in the context of what Kierkegaard is doing, it's not simply that clear. Also notice, and this is something that people often miss in philosophical works, Kierkegaard being a victim of this, as are other writers like Nietzsche, for instance, leaps out, who are funny, who actually do have funny passages where it's kind of darkly funny, right? I don't know if you should take it that seriously. Not that he's an unserious writer, he certainly is, but that it is kind of funny, right? Like a clown comes running out in the street going, theater, like nobody listens to him. Oh, I think this is how the world's going to end. To general applause, right? And laughter. Like we're always worried about the dark bleak. No, don't worry about it so much because we're just going to think it's funny and we're going to applaud. So you can read this as being very dark indeed, but you can also read it as is viable in much of Kierkegaard's work as really kind of darkly humorous, right? Like, it's kind of funny, right? It's, tone is so difficult to get this being translated from the German. I believe this was in German. Yeah, he wrote primarily in German. I should have checked that, but probably written in German, as most of his works were, even though he was Danish and knew Latin, but did not write in Latin. So, yes. So anyway, a simple seeming parable, yet another one of these small ones that seems simple, and yet in there is depths that you might not suspect. So if you encounter a passage like this, or any short philosophical passages, even the ones I've been doing, always, take a moment maybe and pause and say, is this actually funny, right? And that's okay. It's maybe even a good thing, right? Because sometimes there's a lot of funny passages in philosophy. But so often we're like, well, we're philosophical. We have to get this heavy minds on. We have to be very focused. We have to be very serious. And so you can read this as, a fire broke out in a theater. The clown came out. He warned everybody. Nobody paid attention. This is how the world ends. Or you can read it as, oh my gosh, here's this clown. He's gesticulating, the fire, everyone laughs, and the town gets burned down. This is how the world's going to end. We're going to think the end of the world is hilarious, and we're going to applaud, right? So it's sort of an existential joke. So from Kierkegaard's Parable of the Clown, from Either or, his first major published work, I'm pretty sure his first major published book for sure, a simple parable that has been expanded on by many theologians, but subtle, and again, because of the multifaceted nature of the way Kierkegaard was writing, hard to know exactly how seriously we should take that. Nonetheless, a question to always ask, is it really serious, or is it a joke that is also serious? So, thank you very much.